What's up, everyone? Welcome into another episode of Inside the Hoosier Mind, and we are back with Jonathan from our last episode. Unfortunately, Yoel, the big dog, was not able to make it, but Jonathan enjoyed himself so much last show, he decided to come back. Jonathan, how are you, good sir? Appreciate having you back
I'm.
on.
Thanks for having me back. I'm doing good. Obviously, I'm having a good NFL season.
You
Good
are. You
NFL season.
guys you guys basically clinched the division with a pretty handed loss, well, handed win against the Arizona Cardinals that,
Hmm.
everybody figured you guys were going to pretty much win that against Arizona,
Yeah.
even with Kyler Murray back. But you guys are the first and only team so far to now clinch your division. So your guys' path into the postseason is for sure good, as well as Dallas secured their postseason victory. With a Minnesota loss and a Bears loss
Right.
earlier in the day. So Dallas is for sure in the playoffs no matter what happens, whether they win the division or not. And surprisingly enough, I can't believe this just because of the matchup standings and everything like that. Philly does not have a playoff spot secured as it stands right now, even though they have the same exact number of wins. They don't have a playoff
Actually, they
spot
do.
secured.
They do.
Do they?
They're in.
Let me see.
As far as where they're in, that's up in the air. But they clinched. I think.
True.
So what was it? Somebody lost and Philly got in. The Packers, I think.
Uh, okay, yeah, I think you're right. Okay, for whatever reason, I think it was just before that or something. It didn't have them clinched yet, which I thought was weird. I was like, wait a minute, like that
Yeah,
makes zero
they're
sense that Dallas would make it, but they wouldn't make it.
right. Yeah, they're in.
But speaking of, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles because I'm gonna be honest with you. When we last talked on this show, we had talked about how your 49ers beat up on the Philadelphia Eagles, and we had kind of talked about they maybe potentially broke Philly. I think
Hmm.
that may honestly be more of the case now because, not only did you guys beat up on Philly, Dallas then beats up on Philly. They
Hmm.
they don't score an offensive touchdown at all throughout the entire game. Their defense is what scores them a touchdown. They're held to field goals. And then
Hmm.
just this past Monday night, they lose to Drew Lock and the Seattle Seahawks. They have not beat the Seahawks since 2008 now when Matt Hasselbeck was the quarterback. So I'm going to hand it to you, sir. Do you think the 49ers victory really did break Philly? It seems like they don't have any confidence. It seems like everything that they were doing to win, even though we had talked about they didn't really have a lot of definitive victories. Like they were
Hmm.
winning, but it was more Kansas City just didn't make the catch. Otherwise, Kansas City won that game. Josh Allen did everything right for Buffalo to technically win that game. They just
Hmm.
ended up losing it, and Buffalo's defense crumbled on them. Well, then they
I
get bullied by you guys, and we're looking at a totally new, but not in a good way, new Philly Eagles team.
I don't think the 49ers game broke Philly. I think the things that had been plaguing Philly all year just finally caught up with him. Because you're right. If MVS catches that pass from Mahomes that was right in his hands,
Hmm.
like Patrick Mahomes could not have walked that down the field any better than he
Right.
did on that play. And it hit him right in the hands and he dropped it. He catches that. Philly is now 9-5.
10-14.
Then I think it was the next week,
Oh,
if
yeah.
I remember, they're going into overtime against a Buffalo team
Yep.
that, let's be honest, they're not world beaters.
No.
They're they're they're. I mean, now they're seeing it's the opinion is a little bit different now, looking at how they played Dallas, but they played Dallas at home. They
Mhm.
played Philly in Philly, and if not for a couple of questionable calls and Jalen Hurts then putting on the cape. Now, I mean, they're 8-6,
Yep.
two very close games. I don't think the 49ers, just objectively looking at the way that their season is going, who they've played, who they've dominated, home, on the road, it doesn't matter. You're getting away with things against, honestly, a weaker Kansas City team, a weaker a Buffalo team that you're not going to get away with against all pro Fred and the 49ers and that secondary and that front. And we saw that on display. So I don't necessarily think the 49ers broke the Eagles. I just think the 49ers were able to capitalize on the mistakes where those other teams somehow weren't able to, especially in the case of Kansas City.
Yeah, and if you remember, that's what I kind of talked about when we were leading up into the Dallas versus Philly game. It wasn't really that Philly was doing anything different like they had last year. Like last year, we saw
Hmm.
absolutely bully and beat up teams. This year, like you said, it really hasn't been the case. Even against Washington, Sam Howell played probably two of his best games, and they squeaked out 2 wins against Washington.
Another game in Philly
Yeah,
that went into overtime at
yeah.
home, and even the Dallas game, Dak's a one size shoe smaller from potentially winning that game in Philly. So,
Well, and even the same thing. There was even a questionable call with Luke Schoonmaker right at the goal line.
hmm
The defender's already tackling him before he gets the ball. His knee is down. He catches it. They call him down at the 1 yard line. There's a whole mess along with that and
right.
whatnot. But still, yeah, there is a lot about this Eagles team that I was worried about, and I didn't really believe in them. Kind of coming in, I'm like, okay, yes, you guys brought everybody back essentially on the roster. You guys lost some defensive secondary pieces, which has honestly been the
And
Eagles'
the front
crutch for
line.
years. The front
And the front
line,
line. Mm.
and honestly, I told a couple Eagles fans in a group chat that I'm with, I'm like, look, you guys are going to be hurting the day that Jason Kelsey retires, which all honesty is probably going to be at the end of this season,
It might be.
however it goes.
Hmm.
Lane Johnson is what, 32, almost 33, solid right tackle, but he's
He'll
coming
be
to the
back.
end.
He'll be back.
Left tackle, I don't really know their left tackle that well. I know Landon Dickerson is one of their guards, and then
Hmm.
their right guard is also solid. But losing that center and that right tackle potentially, that's two big pieces, and they really
Well,
haven't done anything draft wise to replace them so far.
I actually think the problem goes higher than that because if you remember, they lost two coordinators.
Yes, they do,
So they lost, I believe it was their defensive coordinator.
and their offensive coordinator Shane
They lose
Steichen, their OC.
Steichen. That's right.
Yeah, he went
So
to the Colts, and Gannon went to the Cardinals.
and that's where I think the problem is. This is why I'm saying I don't think Philly's broken. I think their problems have been there the whole time. The Chiefs just aren't strong enough to capitalize. The Bills on the road, they're not strong enough to capitalize. But San Francisco, doesn't matter where you play them, they're
Yeah,
strong enough to capitalize. You're not going into Dallas and just going to roll over Dallas in Dallas. The only teams that have gotten close is Seattle, which was
Seattle.
really surprising.
Yes.
And then San Francisco, obviously, I think they can go into Dallas and win.
Yeah.
But other than that, maybe a Baltimore. I don't see anybody else going into Dallas and competing with the Cowboys. But you can go into Philly and compete with Philly. They've shown that because they've lost their identities with losing those two coordinators.
Yeah. Now, here's the other question I want to pose to you because I've seen this from not only Eagles fans, but also just random NFL fans. And I think it's a bit of an overreaction. So, as a Dallas fan, it makes me laugh, but as also as a Dallas fan and as just an overall NFL fan, I'm kind of sitting here left, shaking my head and scratching it. There are people saying that Jalen Hurts has already regressed, that he's not the same quarterback that he was, and they're already talking about they need to move on from Jalen Hurts. And I'm like, wait,
Oh, wow.
wait a minute, timeout. Like I remember when they drafted him, they had just given Carson Wentz a ton of money. I watched Hurts at
Hmm.
Alabama and then at Oklahoma, did fantastic. Comes in, basically they go 4-11-1. It's a trash season. Doug Peterson's last year. They
Hmm.
basically have no true wide receiver one to throw to. They tear everything apart. They rebuild. And then the very next year leads them to 9-8. They make the playoffs as a wild card. Then they, get beat up by, Tom Brady and the
Tampa,
Buccaneers,
correct.
which, let's be honest, very few teams didn't get beat up by Tom Brady and the Buccaneers when he was with them. And then
Hmm.
last year he does even better, takes them to the league best record, takes them into the Super Bowl. And, whether you were a Kansas City fan, whether you're a fan of the game, maybe that, quote unquote holding call that was called, maybe it's questionable, maybe it's not, depending on who you wanted to win. Me personally, I say it wasn't because I wanted the Chiefs to win. But nonetheless, took them within 3 points of getting a second Super Bowl within 6 years. Do you think it's an overreaction to say, "Oh, it's time to call for Jalen Hurts's, time to call for a starting job," when honestly he's gotten better every single year? This is really his, third full year starting. And,
Uh-oh.
people have film on him. They finally learned, this whole, the brotherly shove or tush push, whatever you want to call it. Like you said, they've lost their coordinators. They have kind of lost their identity. They don't run the ball like people want them to. Even the fans want them to run the ball and they don't do it. Their wide receivers, I think, have lost a lot of confidence. AJ Brown was reported as saying, we need to do better with running our routes and we need to get the ball out quicker, because you look at what Dallas did. Dallas got the ball out super quick, and he was frustrated with the offensive play calling with that.
Here's what I think about, to answer your question fully here. Number one, Jalen Hurts has really only had one good season.
Yes.
Last year.
Yep.
And even then, if you look at their strength of schedule, it was the easiest strength of schedule in the league.
Yep.
Number one easiest schedule in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the Super Bowl, we can say holding or not holding. Did we forget that Jalen Hurts fumbled the ball that turned into 7 the other way in the Super Bowl? Iced the game for the Chiefs, a bad Chiefs team. Now we have what's called the Super Bowl hangover. We turn over into this year. They lose 2 coordinators, as every good playoff team does. They lose coordinators. Kyle Shanahan came from Atlanta after Atlanta went to the Super Bowl. Came from Atlanta to the Niners. They hired him during the playoffs. They hadn't even finished the playoffs. So every team goes through losing coordinators. How many coordinators has Kyle Shanahan lost?
You say Robert Saleh to the Jets, D'Amico Ryans to the Texans.
So every team has to worry about that. It's not new. But Kyle Shanahan has the added advantage of being an offensive coordinator, so he can call the offense. So when you lose an offensive coordinator, it's not that big a deal. You still got the mastermind overhead and seeing things. Nick Sirianni is not that guy. No. And you're seeing that now. Mm-hmm. And what has Jalen Hurts ever been for his whole career? Has he ever been a pocket passer who can dice up a defense? No. Never. In his entire career. At Alabama, he was a running quarterback. In Philly, he is a running quarterback. And you're looking at the stats from Monday night. He got outplayed by Drew Lock, who was a backup to a backup. Geno is not a starting quarterback. He's a backup.
No. Yep.
So when you compile all of this together and looking at the draft class coming out of college, you can make an argument, because honestly, the Eagles have kind of a problem in these next 3 games. These next 3 games kind of pose a problem. The fans are going crazy because Jalen is winning, and what I'm hearing all the time is we just keep winning. We find a way to win. We find a way to win. And Jalen Hurts is not playing great. He's not playing great. And they're getting a defensive, even the Dallas game, the Eagles did not score an offensive touchdown in Dallas. The defense scored a touchdown in Dallas. They scored 3 points. You turn to the Niners game. They scored, 19 points?
19, yeah.
That's not going to get it done. And that goes back to, okay, what is Jalen Hurts really? You look at all his touchdowns, tush pushes.
Yep.
14 out of 14 rushing touchdowns. This is a tush push. I'm sorry, maybe 1, the Buffalo one. That's the only one I can really think about. That isn't a tush push. And so we look at the stats and it's like, okay, he's doing this, this, and this. But if you watch the games, Jalen Hurts is not a world-beating quarterback. We call him elite only because he made it to the Super Bowl last year, coming off of the easiest strength of schedule in the league. And now you're seeing the hangover. And when they come up against these good teams, Kansas City, one catch away from the Eagles losing a game. Dallas, a toe tap away from losing at home to Dallas. These are what the good teams do. And then you come up against an elite team like San Francisco or an elite team in the playoffs. I think Detroit would beat them. Now you're seeing the effects of the coordinators being gone and Jalen not actually being a good quarterback. This should put to bed how good Brock Purdy is. And I know this isn't a conversation about Brock Purdy for MVP yet, but this should put it to bed, because Jalen Hurts has all the weapons around him that anybody would want.
Yep.
elite class weapons, an elite class O-line, which Brock Purdy does not have.
Yeah.
And he's being thoroughly outplayed by third string quarterbacks. So I could see the Eagles looking at making a change here if they don't have a deep run in the playoffs.
Now there is another one that I noticed too, and I don't know if you saw the video. There's a play where it's 3rd and 1. The refs put the ball down. Jason Kelsey, the center, grabs the ball, moves it up, and changes it from 3rd and 1 to 3rd and inches. And they're like, no,
I
no, no,
did see
no,
that.
and they penalized him for it. And it's
Yeah,
funny,
when have you ever been able to do that? This is
never.
as ridiculous as the offsides on Kadarius
Oh,
Toney. Like what are we doing? You've been playing this long enough, Kelsey. Come on, man.
exactly. And it's the same thing with like the whole Dom security guy. I had all the Eagles fans. It's funny. They still get mad at me. They're like, he's doing his job. No, it's not.
No,
That's not what it says in the article.
yeah,
I quoted the article, showed it to
yeah.
them. They're still
He,
mad
he
about it.
he's
Oh,
actually not doing his. He's facing the wrong way.
yeah.
He's not even supposed to be facing the field. Like, but
But
anyway, yeah.
but yeah, but it is kind of, it's, as a Dallas fan, it makes me happy that they're kind of imploding, because it's like, man, thank goodness Philly fans can kind of be humbled, brought back down to earth.
Well, I
My
wouldn't.
favorite thing is Nick Sirianni is upset, which, because I agree. I don't think Nick Sirianni was that guy. I didn't think he was that guy when he first got brought in, because there was an interview where he was like, yeah,
I
even if we
remember
play a
that.
game as simple as rock, paper, scissors, I want to be competitive.
I remember that.
Like, be realistic, man. Come on.
I'll push back on the Cowboys fans just for this one reason. The Eagles' strength of schedule for the rest of the season is a bunch of cupcakes.
Oh, yeah.
Bunch of them. They got 3 easy games. The Cowboys don't.
Nope.
I see the Cowboys dropping 1 or 2 of these games, and
Mhm.
we'll talk about the Cowboys a little bit later. I wouldn't get too excited if I was the Dallas Cowboys right now.
Oh, no. I think, all honesty, with Dallas having lost against Buffalo, the only thing that has really saved Dallas is Philly having lost to Seattle. That's really
Mm-hmm.
the only thing. And like you
Yeah,
said, Philly was coming off on the end of their gauntlet test.
right.
They went, what, 3-1, 4 or 3-2, something like that.
3-2.
And Dallas is technically entering it, and they've already started off pretty poor. They're 1-1 if you count Philly as the beginning of that quote unquote gauntlet test, and then Buffalo as the second one. Then they still have to go to Miami, which we'll talk about here shortly. Then they host Detroit, which may or may
That's
not
not an
be a
easy
beneficial
game.
factor because it's in Dallas, but Detroit, if anything, Detroit is a great indoor team. They suck
Mm-hmm.
outside if it's cold, but they're great
Right.
inside. And
That
then
is
they
not an easy game.
end the year against Washington. Now, I will say, I do agree. On paper, who they're facing, where they're facing them at, the Eagles still have to face the Giants twice, and they have to face
Mm-hmm.
Arizona in the middle. I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't maybe split with the Giants, and maybe they do take a loss to a Kyler Murray led Cardinals team. And that's
I don't
not
see it.
really, and you're right. I say that I don't really see it because of, the overall talent that Philly
Mm-hmm.
has. Everything says they should beat them. I didn't think they lose to Drew Lock either. I'm like, oh man, I saw Geno Smith was out, and I was like, there's no way that Philly loses this game, and they did.
I actually took the Seahawks at 5.5 that game.
Did you really?
I did. I can show you the bet slip. I took the Seahawks at 5.5 because I felt like the Eagles coming off of the Cowboys loss, coming off of the 49ers loss, and going into Seattle, that's
Mhm.
a tough place to play.
It
That's
is.
like a college environment.
Yes.
That's a tough place to play. And the Niners got to do it every year. I watch it happen every year. It's not easy to play Seattle in Seattle.
Yeah.
I took the 5.5, especially with Jalen Hurts being sick.
Yeah.
I didn't see them. I thought they would win, but I thought it would be close.
I did too. In all honesty, when I first saw that Philly was up like 10-0, I was like, oh crap, here we go. They're gonna get this win. And yeah, it's gonna make this Dallas loss so much worse now, because yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Dallas really can't afford to drop any of these games. Now
No.
if Philly does lose at minimum to the Giants at least once, And if Dallas wins out, or at least wins 2 more games, I believe Dallas would actually win the division because they have a better divisional record. But that would also depend
Yes.
on their overall standing as well.
Right.
But
And I don't see Philly losing to the Giants once. And the Cardinals, is that game in Arizona or is it in Philly?
I believe that's in Arizona. Let me look real quick. Believe
That might
that's
change things.
no, it's in Philly actually.
Yeah, not a chance.
So
The only one that they would have a chance of losing would be at New York, but with the talent that the Giants have and the talent that the Eagles have, I don't see it. I think
look,
Marcus Mariota can beat the Giants.
look, man, I'm rooting for Tommy Cutlets to at least get one win. Make Danny DeVito proud that you're his adopted son at some point. But let's move on to Philly's divisional rival of the Dallas Cowboys. They unfortunately got the brakes beat off of them by the Buffalo Bills. And so my question to you, good sir, is did this mean more for Buffalo, or did it mean, or was it more hurtful to Dallas because they lost? Like you said, they get kind of the controversial beneficial call against Kadarius Toney being offsides. Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are livid. We obviously know how that goes. Both actually got fined because they were livid
They
about the
should.
referees doing that.
And the referee did the right thing. They called the right
Yeah.
call. He was a yard
Yeah.
and a half offsides.
And like everybody else has kind of pointed out when they were like, well, wait a minute, they should have told. And then like, no, Kadarius
No.
Toney even admitted he didn't check with the refs. And there comes a point where you should check, and the referee's not going to come up and hold your hands like 19, you're offside.
Yeah.
Like
Tony, I played wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I played wide receiver. This is the amount of effort that it would have taken him to get onside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just look to his left. That's all he had to do was look left. Yeah, he was only looking at Patrick Mahomes. Yeah,
that's all he had to do. Just look and take one step back, an inch and a half, and he would have been fine. But no, that one's completely on him. But anyway, what's the question for Buffalo and Dallas?
So who did this win or loss mean more for? Did it mean more for Buffalo to win, or did it hurt Dallas more to lose?
It meant more for Buffalo only because Philly lost.
Yeah.
Because if Buffalo, I watched the game. I think this was the game of the week, and I figured the Niners were going to win. But this game was more important because if Dallas had won, now we have to win against Baltimore, which is a tough game.
Oh, yeah.
So I watched the whole game. Dallas didn't even get off the bus. What? Josh Allen threw for less than 100 yards, and they didn't just win the game. It was a 3-touchdown win like that.
7 completions, 95 yards, not even 100 yards.
And this is why I'm saying the only reason why we're not crushing Dallas is because Philly then turned around and lost to Seattle. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason. Because if Philly wins, now that win that Dallas had against Philly means nothing.
Nothing.
Because Philly is back on top of the division. Dallas is getting destroyed in the media, and we're singing a whole new song. So the only reason why this actually means more for Buffalo is because at the current time, Dallas is still in the running for the division and the number 2 or 3 seed and having a playoff game at home. But I will say, for Dallas, this Miami game becomes critical now, which is not a gimme game. I had an idea about who Miami was, and then I looked at the stats. They're number 1 in passing. They're top 10 in rushing, and they're at home. This is not an easy game for Dallas that's coming up here. But for Buffalo to win the game the way that they won, I mean, they pushed Dallas around for 4 quarters straight. Dak Prescott was not getting a lot of blitz pressure. Like they just I couldn't explain it.
And I know you saw he threw the ball to like 2 defenders, hit them right in the chest twice. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, you gotta stop.
Throw 3 interceptions. He tried to throw 3 interceptions that game.
He did. He tried. Here's the other thing I'll say too about the Miami game real quick before we jump back into it. The interesting thing about Miami, they have no wins. They're 0-3 against teams that are 500 or better. Dallas is
Yes.
1-3
Right.
against teams that are 500 or
Right.
better. They're the only time in NFL history two teams that are 10-4 come in have losing records to 500 teams or better.
And the thing about Miami too, they're getting all these accolades. They're number one in passing
Mm-hmm.
because they got Waddle and Tyreek on the outside,
Yep.
but they're also really good at rushing. They got some
Yeah.
great running backs, and that
Mm-hmm.
is Dallas's weakness, besides being away from Big D.
Yeah.
So this is a. You remember how the last time I was on, I said Philly's season's going to come to a head. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
called they can't drop another game to Dallas, and then I called their season's coming to a head here. They can't afford this. Here comes Dallas's season coming to a head here.
Yep.
You can't lose another game.
Yeah.
And you got 3 tough games against playoff teams at least.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not Washington. Don't you have Washington at the end?
Washington at the end, but Washington's
Yeah.
already been eliminated, so
Yeah.
they don't really count.
So you got 2 teams, one of which you might see again in the playoffs because I think
Mm-hmm.
Detroit's going to make it in. I mean,
Yeah. I think
you can't lose another one.
all they have to do is beat, because they still have to face Minnesota twice. All they have to do is beat Minnesota once, and they win the
Yeah,
division.
the Nick Mullins led Minnesota Vikings. Yeah,
Oh
that's 2
man,
W's.
woo! But well, let's look at Buffalo's schedule real quick because I think we both agree that it meant more for Buffalo to win. You know, they lost that kind of heartbreaker to the Eagles. Again, a couple controversial calls. They were already on a
Yeah.
2-game losing streak just before that. They lost to the Bengals. For whatever reason, they lost to the Broncos. They beat the snot out of the poor, helpless Jets, lose to the Eagles. They beat the Chiefs. They heartedly beat the Cowboys. Now, their schedule for Buffalo kind of gets easy. And if they win out, there's a strong chance they can make it into the postseason at 11-6 because they have to go to LA to face the Chargers. They have to host the
keep
Patriots, and then they have to go back to Miami to finish the season.
keep an eye on that Chargers game. Actually, I think that's a trap game for Buffalo.
I could see that, especially first game post Brandon Staley. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what identity are they going to come out with? Now, I will say though, this is a Justin Herbert less Chargers team because Herbert is, just remember, Herbert's out for the entire season.
Right.
So
That's right. However, they are playing on the road
mhm,
in LA, and the Chargers do have some talent. I'm not. I
they
don't
do.
think. I don't think LA is going to. If I had to put money on it, I would put money on Buffalo. But this is one that I would stay away from and watch it because the Chargers do have some talent on offense and defense.
Mhm,
They
they
just
do.
lost, I think, the weak link of the team, which is the coach. And now you kind of got new energy, new coach, new voices in the locker room. This has the potential of being a trap game here.
I agree. I think the potential is there for them, but I do kind of wonder, you know, can what is it? Eastick is the
Yeah,
quarterback's name.
Easton Stick. Yeah.
He's from North Dakota State. I know that, but I don't. I do agree. I think the talent is obviously there. You know, you've got Bosa on the defensive side. Khalil
Mm-hmm.
Mack is having a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic year. You've got Derwin James at the safety. I know Murray has kind of been a little bit of a letdown at linebacker, but
Mm-hmm.
still solid. You still have Keenan Allen. You still have Mike Williams. Now I know
Right. Well, I think
Quint
Williams is out, isn't he?
is he?
Yeah,
Yeah, he
he's
is
out.
because Quentin Johnson got moved up to the 2, which he's
Right.
kind of underperformed as a first round rookie talent, unfortunately.
I think who did Kellen Moore take over as head coach there interim?
That I don't know. I
We
never
don't know.
saw it, and I
I
don't
didn't
know if it
either.
ever got
Yeah.
announced. I
Okay.
can look. I'll see if I can find it real quick.
Yeah, that they've got 2 games. I think they have 2 games that are iffy. I personally, looking at the playoff picture, I don't see Buffalo. They're probably going to be. It's going to depend on what the Jaguars do. I think
Hmm.
if the Jaguars slip up, Buffalo can get in. But I mean, I don't see them beating the Browns. The Bengals somehow are surging. The Colts somehow are in there. I don't understand that. But they would have they'd have to beat Miami, which I really don't see happening in Miami, and then
Mhm.
they would have to have Jacksonville lose some of these games. Well, no, because if the Jaguars, yeah, the Colts, yeah, I see Jacksonville and the Colts. That's going
Mhm.
to be the wild card there.
Yeah. So the interim Chargers head coach is Giff Giff Smith.
They
Never
didn't
heard
give it to
this.
Kellen Moore.
No. And I'll be honest with you,
Ooh.
I'm not surprised because as a Cowboys fan who, dealt with Kellen Moore for the last few seasons,
Hmm.
I would consider him a slightly above average offensive coordinator. And
Okay.
I say that because yes, you will look very prolific, your passing numbers will look ecstatic.
Hmm.
He abandons the run game too quickly and he scores too quickly, which I know a lot of people say, wait a minute,
Mm.
he scores too quickly. That matters a lot in a football game because if you
Could you
have
be
a
quiet,
Tom
please, Craig?
Brady, if you have a Tom Brady on the other side, if you have an Aaron Rodgers on the other side, if you have a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, and we've seen it with Patrick Mahomes, all he needs is
Hmm.
13 seconds and he can
That
put you
was
in
more
winning
bad
games.
Buffalo than good Mahomes.
But still, and even then, is it your defense goes to crap? Is it him just being that good? So to
Okay.
me, with Moore, the fact that he does that, it's like, no, you gotta mix it up a little bit. Yes, you can get
Hmm.
the 80-yard touchdown in 10 seconds, but there's
Hmm.
still a minute left on the clock.
Right.
That's manageable to work with, especially with how the defense gives up big plays. The
Right.
other thing that I've really criticized not only Mike McCarthy for, but Dan Quinn, this Dallas team is so penalized. They are so
Yeah, they
undisciplined. It
are
bugs the
undisciplined.
snot out of me
They
because
are
they'll
undisciplined.
they'll get a first down, they'll get a big play, and then you see the little yellow at the bottom and it's flag. It's offensive holding. I'm like, mother trucker, please, for love of God, stop holding.
Yeah. Or offsides
Or offside,
yeah.
something just stupid. But
Right.
yeah, I I can still kind of see, Buffalo winning against them. Now, I will say the other benefit for them is Miami's schedule. I don't know if you see Miami's schedule. Miami's schedule is rough
I have
because
not seen Miami's schedule.
they host Dallas this weekend. The
Hmm.
following weekend they travel to Baltimore to take on the
Ooh.
Ravens, and then they host the Bills at the end of the season. So
Yeah,
they
that's
have
tough.
3
This
tough
is, yeah.
games. So this very well could be if the Dolphins lose potentially these 2 games, just hypothetically, and then they take on the Bills and the Bills win, the Bills then
That's a
win
good
the
point.
AFC East again.
That's a good point. I think that's their ticket in then is Miami slipping up,
Yeah.
which I, the Dallas game is kind of the one that I think they can win. I
Mhm.
don't think they can go to Baltimore and beat them.
No.
And then the Bills, man, we're going to have some really good final games of the year across
Yeah,
the NFL.
really good games at the end of the year.
Really good games, except for maybe the NFC East. Like everywhere else,
Yeah.
it's like you got to have this game.
And it kind of sucks because last year the NFC East was so good. They got 3 teams
Hmm.
into the postseason last year, and it's like, man, look at the
Yeah.
NFC. Went from being the NFC worst to the the NFC beast. Like, love it. But yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I
it
it's going to be interesting. It's going to be
it
interesting to see.
it will. It'll be very interesting. So we have kind of talked a little bit about the Miami versus Dallas game. So we'll touch on it real quick before we go into our last 2 topics because
Sure.
we're kind of combining them into one. So obviously we do think and agree that both Dallas versus Miami, there's talent on both sides. Offensively, they're 2 of the top 5 teams in the league. Where I think Dallas has a little bit of the edge, at least statistically on paper. They do have a top 10 defense, which I'm not sure if Miami has that. I know Miami's defense is good. I don't know
They do
what
have a top 10 defense. Actually,
do
they're
they?
ranked higher than Dallas.
Okay, I was like, I knew they had a pretty good defense, but I wasn't sure where they were actually ranked at as far as
Yeah,
defensive side of the ball
I'm
goes.
looking at it. They're first in offense, which is crazy. Fifth in defense, first in
Yep,
passing, fourth in rushing.
yep.
So
So
they're
you're right.
top
Yeah,
five all the way around.
Yeah. So yeah, that might give Miami the edge actually with that. Now I will say the other thing, like you said, that I think also gives Miami the edge is their run game because Buffalo and James Cook. Oh my God! Like I
Yeah,
was
nobody
watching that.
saw that coming.
I was watching that. It's like, wait a minute, they're running the stop running the ball.
Right.
Stop running the
Nobody
ball.
saw that coming. But you can see it coming from Miami.
Yeah.
Here, you said something that I think, excuse me, you said something that I think is going to be the difference here. Which team can overcome their past? Miami's 0-3 against winning teams.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas is 1-3 against winning teams. And now looking at how that one win, I'll count Seattle because Seattle was a winning team when they played them. So
Yes.
2-4 against
Yeah.
winning teams. Now looking at how Philly looks, and that Seattle game looks a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
but Miami's better than Seattle.
Oh yeah.
And so which team is going to rise to the occasion, I think is going to be the theme here. And since it's away from Dallas, that's going to be tough because Dak tends to shrink on the road. And it's not just the winning teams. Like even against Carolina this year, Dak did
Mm-hmm.
not look good until about halfway through the third quarter. Like it was
Yeah.
close with the worst team in the league.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I will say there are two other things I would say that kind of helps Dallas. Doesn't mean they'll necessarily win, but kind of helps Dallas. And you actually pointed it out last show. Fact that Cowboys fans travel really well, and even a couple other people have pointed out for this Miami home
it's
game.
true.
While yes, it's in Miami, a lot of Cowboys fans down in Florida. A lot of
That's
Cowboys fans
true.
are going to travel to sunny Florida because it's warm, and they'll travel for this game. So it'll at
That is
least
true.
environment wise, it'll be pretty close to a Cowboys home game, which will kind of help them.
The deciding factor then would be who's the better coach and who's the better quarterback.
And which I do think what else will affect that, especially for Tua, is whose offensive line is going to hold up better.
Right.
Because to me, yes, Dallas got a pretty big injury with Zach Martin. I don't know if he'll be game time status, game time worthy or not. We saw the huge difference it made when he was gone. Miami's offensive line is also pretty banged up, unfortunately. So that'll also be a big thing is can Dallas potentially take advantage of a weak Miami, offensive line? Because if you can get to Tua, albeit all he has to do is chuck it to Tyreek, and Tyreek's going to go off for like 30 miles an hour. But still, if
Yeah.
if they can
Yeah.
get to him,
I'm watching two things. I'm watching two things in this Cowboys Dolphins game. Deron Bland versus Tyreek Hill.
mm-hmm,
And like you said, that front line of Miami. The front
mm-hmm,
line of Miami. Because I do think Dak is a better quarterback overall than Tua is.
yeah,
I think having Waddle and Tyreek Hill on the outside is what's helping Tua's numbers. Like the fact that they're number one in offense with 0 wins against winning teams is a little bit. I think it's fool's gold. If I
mm-hmm,
had to put money down, I would put money on Dallas winning this game. I've seen them play against better caliber teams than I've seen Miami play, and I think Micah Parsons has the potential to be a game wrecker
mm-hmm,
against Miami. They're coming off of a humiliating loss. They're probably going to be really fired up. Um, I think I trust Dallas a little bit more to show up than I do Miami. If Dallas loses this game, though, it's catastrophic for their season because
yeah,
now there's virtually no shot that they have against about getting the 1 seed, let alone the NFC East division, which means they're going to have to go on the road in the playoffs. And I think the only team that's a playoff team that they've shown the capability of playing against is Philly on the road.
yeah. And I will say that I'll be honest, as even as a Cowboys fan, I know the number one loss to the 49ers, which is going to be a massive factor. Because let's be honest, right now, the 49ers are, to me, the absolute 1 seed.
Yeah.
Philly has obviously crumbled. I don't like Detroit away from Detroit. Had they won against
I
maybe the
agree.
Packers and had a couple more quality wins, I could maybe argue Detroit. I don't see it. So to me, the number 1 seed's kind of out for Dallas. For me, I do agree, though. I think if they lose this game, you basically lose the NFC East at that point, which to me
Mm-hmm.
is probably the bigger win that they need. Because, like you said, if they have to go on the road, it's not happening.
Right.
You might maybe get a win against Philly if you have to go on the road, maybe, but
Maybe.
that's a cold environment, and that's a second time you have to go to Philly to face them. And who knows? It may be a slightly better Philly team. It may be a revenge game for Philly because, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we have to face our divisional opponent again. We want revenge for the last time we faced you and you guys humiliated us. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, they have to win 2 of these next 3 games. They
yeah,
actually they have to win all of them because I don't
they do.
see Philadelphia losing any of these games.
I don't either. So, yeah, to me, that all of them have to be must wins. And like I said, with Detroit coming into Dallas and it being an indoor game, that makes me
Right.
super skeptical about whether or
Right.
not that will happen. But let's move on to our kind of last and final topic of the upcoming big Christmas time game of the San Francisco 49ers facing off against the Baltimore Ravens. And it's three MVPs in this game, two of them on the same team. I've heard it will be basically who performs the best as far as who everybody thinks will end up winning the MVP. You have Lamar Jackson on the Ravens as an MVP front runner, basically against Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey on the 49ers side for
Mm-hmm.
who's going to potentially win the MVP for there. So, in your opinion, do because let's be honest, Brock Purdy has had a solid year. He's bounced back from adversity. I know we talked about it. He technically doesn't have a come from behind victory, even though if a kick goes the right way it's supposed to in Cleveland,
Yeah.
that technically gets erased, but is
Right.
what it is. This is what we're looking at currently. But CMC has also had a fantastic year and is also one of the big heart and soul pieces of the 49ers offense. So to you, who do you think really deserves it more? Because both make a significant impact. And we've seen if the 49ers don't have one or the other, it's a little bit rough for their offense as far as trying to move the ball down the field goes.
Um, I don't. I think Brock Purdy is going to be the MVP. I think he deserves it. I think it should be him. CMC has had a couple of games where he hasn't done well, and because
Mm-hmm.
of Brock Purdy, they've won those games. The
Right.
Dallas game, he did not
Yeah.
do very well,
Mm-hmm.
but because we had Brock and because Debo and Brandon are great, they
Mm-hmm.
won that game. Kittle is great. They won that game. I've seen this offense with Jimmy Garoppolo. With Jimmy Garoppolo, they scored 24 points a game. With
Mm-hmm.
Brock Purdy, they are scoring 35 points a game. And Jimmy Garoppolo also had Christian McCaffrey before he got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So as now, I'm not trying to say that Christian he wouldn't be a deserving person if he were to win it. I
Mm-hmm.
do think though that if Brock Purdy was a first round pick, this we he's leading the league in every quarterback metric, just about. But top 2, if not leading the league in them, even touchdowns and passing yards. He's like top 5. If
Yeah.
this was CJ Stroud, this
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't even be an argument. Christian McCaffrey would not even be on the map. But because he's Mr. Irrelevant
Yep.
now, and because they lost 3 games when they were injured, people are trying to maneuver in why he shouldn't get the award. Watch the games.
Mm-hmm.
Look at where Brock Purdy is placing the ball. Look at I know he hasn't had a late come from behind victory. He has gone down on the road and orchestrated a 6 touchdown straight drive against Philadelphia. He
Yeah.
went into Jacksonville. That I actually went to that game. Went into Jacksonville after coming off of a 3-game skid and just put up 300 plus yards and 4 touchdowns. Not all the CMC. As a matter of fact, that was the game CMC's touchdown record was broken. He didn't even get a touchdown that game.
Yep.
So I don't. I know what it is, and they probably won't give it to him just because he's Mr. Irrelevant. But
Mm-hmm.
if I had to pick somebody who this year has shown that he is the most valuable player, I would pick Brock Purdy.
Okay. You say I get it completely. I agree with you. And looking at his stats too, I mean, like you said, if he wasn't Mr. Irrelevant, it would probably be Brock Purdy's to run away with, barring
Yeah.
him getting any type of injury. Because if you look, he's I think 5 yards shy of 3,800 yards. Yeah, he's 5 yards shy of 3,800 yards, 29 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He's got 2 rushing touchdowns on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he's done fantastic. Now, like you said, if we're looking at CMC, also had a fantastic year so far. He's 8 yards shy of 1,300 yards. He's got 13 rushing touchdowns, and he actually has, I believe, 7 receiving touchdowns. Yes, he does. 7
The,
receiving touchdowns and 500 receiving yards. So he's had a
the
fantastic year
reason
so far
why,
himself.
though, is because of Brock Purdy. The
Yes.
reason why is because of Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
If you juxtapose Jimmy Garoppolo with the play action versus Brock Purdy with the play action, the first play of the game, just look at the first play of the game when Jimmy Garoppolo was running the team. Almost always a run.
Yep.
First play of the game with Brock Purdy, almost always a pass. It's completely different now. He because teams are now daring Brock Purdy to throw the ball, and he's throwing the ball and carving them up. And so the reason why Christian McCaffrey can have all the yardage and the great year that he's having is because they know Brock Purdy is number one in play action. He's number one against the blitz. Like, you can't even pressure this kid. And so, Dallas showed you stack the box, Christian can't run anywhere. No running back can when you stack the box. But Brock Purdy's showing you stack the box and come after him in a blitz, it might be a touchdown over. These are the things that I'm saying is why being Mr. Irrelevant coming off of a major surgery. What other quarterback has done this, led the league in everything, coming off of a UCL injury? If he was anybody, if he was taken at Dak Prescott's draft position, this wouldn't even be a conversation.
Yeah. Now, we'll flip it to the other side with Lamar. And I'll be honest, I'm looking at Lamar's stats. There's nothing really to me that says Lamar deserves the MVP. Like,
I agree.
Let's be honest. Like, if we're gonna look at quarterbacks as far as statistically goes, and even though he played a crap game last week, I would put Dak above Lamar in the MVP race right now.
I would as well.
Because for anybody that's kind of questioning it, Lamar has basically 3,100 passing yards. He's at 3,105. He's got 17 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Now he leads the team in rushing. He has 741 yards on the ground and 5 rushing touchdowns, so a total of 22 touchdowns all total. And he's 11-3. Technically, right now they're sitting at the number 1 seed, barring anything crazy. And the Ravens in their year, they have to take on the 49ers this coming Christmas. Then the Dolphins on December 31st, and then they host the Steelers to end the year on January 7th. There's nothing really to me in Lamar's resume so far this year that says, they kind of deserve it. Because looking at the teams that they've beat, they beat the Texans to start the year. They beat the Bengals when they were struggling. They lose to the Colts. They beat the Browns, who have been a mess. They beat the Titans, mess. They handled the Lions wholeheartedly in Baltimore.
Yeah,
also a mess.
Ridiculous.
They manhandled the Seahawks in Baltimore, also a mess. And then, of course, they beat a Jake Browning-led Bengals. They beat the Chargers. That's not hard to do. They beat the Rams. And then they beat the Jaguars. So they're and honestly, and that's even kind of a slight to the Jaguars because they've been a disappointment so far this year. They haven't lived up to expectations. I'll be honest. It's like when everybody says it's, whoever does the best in this game is going to basically win MVP. I'm like, I can't really make an argument for Lamar. Like, to me, it is honestly between Brock and CMC as far as who I would give the MVP vote to.
The only reason why Lamar is there is because Brock Purdy's Mr. Irrelevant. If
Yeah.
he wasn't Mr. Irrelevant, like this would not be a conversation. We were throwing Dak Prescott in there, and Dak has got blown out by Brock
Hmm.
Purdy and the Niners. It was not a contest at all. It was like 21-0 at halftime or something like that, 21-3.
21
Like,
to 3. Yeah.
and then he goes into Jacksonville and tosses it around the yard on the road. He went into Philly against another MVP candidate at the time and blew them out. And
Hmm.
17, they're 18-0 now. When Brock
Hmm.
Purdy and Trent and Christian play.
Hmm.
18-0. That is better than any other quarterback, I think, in the history of the league when it comes to quarterback, running back, left tackle. Better than everybody.
Hmm.
If he was CJ Stroud or Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence or somebody who just has a higher draft status, and Brock's, an unassuming guy. He's not electric like Lamar. He's not Cam Newton coming out with all these crazy outfits and stuff like that. He's just a
Yeah.
humble Iowa guy, drives a tractor, you know. He's just this humble dude. And so because of that, people are balking at giving him the MVP, even though on the field he's showing that you dare me to pass, I'll dice you up. You drop into coverage, we'll run a play action, and I'll just drop it to Debo over your head. Like I don't understand why people are so hesitant about this kid is the front runner. He's leading the league in passer rating. He's leading the league in passing yards. He's leading the league in passing touchdowns, touchdown interception ratio. Like, what else do you want?
I do think it goes a lot into, like you said, with him being Mr. Irrelevant, because at that point then it kind of eliminates where you are in your draft position. Which, let's
Mm-hmm.
be honest, if you look at over the years, players that come out of, the later rounds, you're like, well, wait a minute. Like if we did a redraft, they wouldn't be there. That
Right.
happens all the time. The quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote greatest quarterback of all time, whether it's Tom Brady, whether it's Joe Montana, whoever, didn't come out of the first round. They
Right.
came out of a later round.
Right.
Look at Brock Purdy, the same thing. Look at George Kittle. He was a fifth round pick for them, out of Iowa.
Right.
Heck, look at Tony Romo. Tony Romo was undrafted, did
Right.
fantastic. Like it and that's the thing, and some very good friend of mine on here actually pointed this out one time. You can have as many first round draft picks as you want. The picks don't matter until the players actually play out on the field. Otherwise, those picks,
Exactly.
it's like a brand new car. As soon as you take it off the lot, it depreciates in value, because unless you make the right pick, doesn't matter who you pick or where it's
Right.
picked at, they may or may not actually live to expectations.
Right.
Albeit perfect case, Zach Wilson. That's the biggest reach to me
Right.
in the
Justin
university of
Fields.
reaching. But or Trey Lance, who's also on the Cowboys. He was a reach.
And that should tell you something. Like, they moved up to get Trey Lance. They picked Brock Purdy and then immediately moved off of Trey Lance.
Hmm.
They didn't even let the taillights. They shipped him to Dallas and looked ahead. Got
And think
Sam
about
Darnold, moved forward.
all that they gave up for it too. And here's the other
Mm-hmm.
thing too that has worked in San Francisco's favor, and I don't know if you've noticed this or not. Think about any other team. If they would have given up 3 first round draft picks to move up to the number 3 overall spot to pick a dude that's supposed to be the franchise quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
they move off of him 3 years later,
Mm-hmm.
and basically you guys got what, like a third round pick for Trey, if I remember
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, third round. Second or third round, I can't remember
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
You give up all that to get him, you get almost really nothing back. How many other franchises you think would just be ripped to shreds because it's like, what are you doing?
All of them,
Yeah.
honestly. All of them. It's a testament to John Lynch. And
Hmm.
he has not gotten the credit that he absolutely deserves. And I think the only reason is because they haven't won the Super Bowl yet.
Yeah.
Once they win the Super Bowl, I mean, can you put together a more Hall of Fame resume? You fleece the Carolina Panthers for the best running back in the league,
Yeah.
You move up, grab Trey. He doesn't work. You ship him out of there. Try Jimmy for a time. He doesn't work. You ship him out of there. Mr. Irrelevant comes into the league. You're drafting these great running backs. The defense completely flipped as soon as John Lynch got there. And the last 5 years, they've gone to 3 NFC championship games. And the only reason that they've proven that they didn't go further is because Brock got hurt. I mean, they could have won the Super Bowl last year.
You say either Brock getting hurt or, Kyle Shanahan just didn't trust Jimmy G to throw the ball. And the other benefit that you guys had is, Maury Povich came back and said Jimmy G is Aaron Rodgers' father, which was a beautiful sight for me to see every time. He has to call Jimmy G daddy, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
But man, it has been a blast. Loved having you on. Hopefully you enjoyed coming on for a second round. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. This is going to be the last show, at least for this year. We'll probably come back next year after the holidays and whatnot. But want to wish everyone a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever holidays that you guys celebrate and enjoy. Happy New Year's. Enjoy time with friends, family, loved ones, all of that. Jonathan, once again, appreciate having you on, man. Take care. And
before we go, can I give my picks really quick?
Sure can.
I think the Niners are going to beat Baltimore at 5.5-point favorites. I was a little bit like, oh, I don't know, but Lamar Jackson, running quarterbacks always give the Niners trouble, but I think they have kind of solved the problem over these last couple of weeks because they've had 2 of them. I know they're not Lamar, but I think they have something for it. I think Dallas will win in Miami.
Okay.
What's the other big one? There's another big one this weekend.
Let's see. I just had the schedule up. Let's see.
So did I. Yeah.
You've got Buffalo at Los Angeles against the Chargers. You've got the Browns at Houston, although Stroud is questionable as to whether or not he'll play or not.
The Browns should win that game. The way they're playing.
You've got Detroit at Minnesota. If Detroit wins, they win the division.
And Detroit should win that game.
You've got a pretty good game with Jacksonville versus Tampa Bay. You've got the leader of the AFC versus NFC South.
Tampa should win that game handedly. Because I'm pretty sure Trevor's not playing. Isn't he questionable? Concussion or something?
Let's see. Say, I know Stroud is because of concussion for the Texans. Yeah, right. He isn't practicing as of today. He did not practice. Right. So
if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play, the Buccaneers should completely destroy them. That'll be a blowout.
Are you saying that would move the if the Colts can beat Atlanta, that would move the Colts up into first place to the AFC South? The Colts of all teams after losing Anthony Richardson. One other game that's
Shane Steichen.
Right. One other game that's kind of big for Christmas would be Las Vegas goes to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs, which I mean the Raiders
should win that game.
They should
win. The Chiefs should win that game. In Arrowhead, the Chiefs should win that game.
But we will see. But appreciate having you on, man. You're welcome more than any time to come on. Thank you for thank you for joining me, honestly.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Tony. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas to you. And we will see y'all, as a corny dad joke would say, see y'all next year. We will see y'all next time.
Playoff time, baby.
I know. Excited.